My name is Colonel Alara Merritt, and I was trained to detect ambushes. You learn fast in war zones. Trust your instincts, sweep every corner, expect betrayal behind every smile. But no amount of battlefield training could have prepared me for the ambush waiting at my father's funeral. It started with the reading of the will. Not even 3 hours after the last shovel of dirt had landed on the casket, my family, flesh and blood, were already in a polished conference room, air-conditioned and emotionally vacant, waiting to divide the spoils. I sat alone on the right side of the table, dressed in the same pressed black uniform I'd worn at Dad's burial. I wasn't crying anymore. Not because I wasn't grieving, but because grief in my world had a protocol. Across from me sat my brother Daniel, once a golden boy, now an overgrown teenager with a Rolex and a taste for shortcuts. Beside him, my Aunt Marla, whose loyalty could be bought for less than a bottle of wine. And at the head of the table, smirking like a cat who already ate the bird, sat Mom. Her name is Evelyn Merritt. To the world, she's a respected philanthropist. To me, she's the woman who once told me, if you'd smiled more, maybe your father wouldn't have left you all those weapons instead of his warmth. The attorney, Mr. Dell, cleared his throat. He was shaking. I didn't blame him. For the late Mr. Merritt's original will dated 5 years ago, the estate, business shares, and family properties were left equally to his 2 children, Alara and Daniel. I saw Daniel's jaw tighten. Mom didn't even blink. Dell continued, however, a revised document, dated 2 months before Mr. Merritt's passing, nullifies that version. My heart stopped. He opened a fresh folder. In this version, the entire estate, including the lake house, Merritt Technologies shares, and personal assets, have been placed in a private family trust controlled solely by Evelyn Merritt, with Daniel named as successor trustee. I didn't speak. Didn't flinch. I watched them watch me, like animals circling prey, waiting for the reaction. Any objections, Colonel Merritt? Mom asked. The words rolled off her tongue like venom in pearls. No, I said calmly. Not yet. After the meeting, I drove to the lake house. The gate code had been changed. I tried calling the groundskeeper. No answer. The same property my father and I spent summers clearing brush on, training in, restoring together. It was now locked. Sealed. Claimed. By people who hadn't even shown up to his last deployment ceremony. At the motel that night, I sat in silence, staring at a framed photo of Dad and me in uniform. It wasn't about the money. It was about erasure. They wanted me gone, not just from the will but from the story. Like I was never part of it. The next morning, I filed a motion to contest the will. Mom, of course, responded with legal fire. She hired an army of attorneys to crush the claim. She's unstable from combat. She wasn't present in his final months. Her deployment schedule alienated her from the family. Daniel even claimed I'd threatened him via voicemail. What they didn't know. I record everything. Weeks passed. Court dates were set. They came in like sharks in suits. And I came alone. Except I wasn't empty-handed. I had something they'd all forgotten about. Dad's off-grid safe house. Buried in paperwork. Hidden in a trust separate from his civilian assets. A place he built for, if things ever went sideways. I drove 5 hours through dirt roads and pine wilderness to get there. Inside, beneath a loose floorboard, was the black case. Fingerprint locked. When it opened, I found what I didn't even know I was looking for. Not weapons. Not money. A single manila folder. Labeled. Contingency. If Alara is betrayed. Inside. A signed notarized statement of his final will intentions. Explicitly naming me. Documents showing that Daniel had withdrawn over $300,000 from Dad's business under a fake consulting company 6 months before his death. A sealed USB drive. I reviewed it all. Every document. Every timestamp. The USB held something chilling. Security footage. From Dad's home office. Footage of Mom and Daniel sitting at his desk, talking about making changes before the dementia sets in. Footage of Marla handing over a signature sheet with forged initials. It wasn't just betrayal. It was fraud. It was theft. It was criminal. I didn't confront them. Not yet. Instead, I did what I was trained to do. I built a case. I made copies. Labeled exhibits. Prepare deposition requests. And I waited for the next court date. The day finally came. They arrived smug. Mom in pearls and a tailored navy suit. Daniel chewing gum like he hadn't lied on 5 separate affidavits. Marla with her designer bag and false sympathy eyes. The judge entered. Court was called to order. Mom's attorney launched into his performance, describing me as emotionally unstable, disgruntled, and detached. I said nothing. Until the judge turned to me. Colonel Merritt, do you have any evidence to support your claim? I stood. Confident. And I handed the clerk one paper. One sheet. Not even stapled. Please enter Exhibit 17 into the record, I said. The clerk passed it to the judge. She read it. Paused. Raised her eyebrows. Then she looked to the bailiff and said 6 words that I will never forget. Please call courthouse security. Immediately. Within minutes, 2 uniformed officers entered the courtroom. Place Ms. Evelyn Merritt and Mr. Daniel Merritt under temporary detainment pending fraud investigation, the judge ordered. The room erupted. Mom stood shouting. This is a mistake. That's not real. Daniel paled. You can't do this. We're family. I turned to face them as the officers led them away. Yes, I said. We were. Until you declared war. Courtroom silence is a special kind of silence. It doesn't feel like peace. It feels like the moment before a storm. And when the judge called for courthouse security, the lightning struck. Mom screamed. Daniel's face turned gray. Marla tried to slip out the side door until the bailiff stopped her too. I stood still. People think vengeance is loud. But it isn't. It's the calm when your enemies realize you were never bluffing. The courtroom cleared quickly. The judge declared a recess pending criminal review. I gathered my exhibits, my drive, and my file copies, and left without looking back. Outside, the local press was already gathering. Colonel Merritt, is it true you submitted footage of your own mother forging your father's will? Were you aware of the financial theft before your father's death? Did you expect your family to turn on you? I said nothing. Let the headlines write themselves. Silence speaks volumes when truth's on your side. That evening, I checked into a small bed and breakfast on the outskirts of town. Not because I had to, but because I needed to. Peace doesn't come easy when your own blood is being investigated for felony fraud. The innkeeper recognized me. You're the colonel, right? She asked quietly. I nodded. She smiled. Good. It's about time someone shut them down. The next morning, I got a call from Detective Monroe, the lead investigator assigned after the courtroom bombshell. Colonel Merritt, he began, just finished reviewing the files you submitted. We've corroborated your father's notary signature with the county office. His contingency letter is valid. And the video footage is damning. He paused. Ms. Merritt, your mother, has lawyered up. Daniel too. But your Aunt Marla asked for immunity. In exchange for testimony. I nearly laughed. Of course she did. Give her whatever deal you want, I said. Just get it all on record. Over the next week, the Merritt family name became headline gold. Veteran betrayed by family in estate scheme. Colonel turns the tables in inheritance battle. Local philanthropist accused of multi-million-dollar fraud. The same people who once called me intense or over-disciplined were now praising my grit and unshakable character. Funny how fast admiration shows up after someone else breaks the silence first. But not all of it was satisfying. The house I grew up in, where Dad taught me how to fish, how to break down a rifle, how to listen to silence, was being processed as evidence. The lake property, the shares, the art collection, frozen. Pending outcome of the criminal case. None of it felt like justice. Until I got the letter. It was from a man named Henry Givens, a former sergeant under my father in Vietnam. He was old, writing in shaky cursive, but the words hit me like a direct order. Your father always knew someone would come for what he built. That's why he trusted you. Because while they saw value in property, he saw strength in legacy. Don't stop. Elara. Your war's not over yet. I folded that letter into my journal. Next to a photo of Dad smiling in uniform. Next to a list I'd made long ago called Lines I Will Never Let Them Cross. 2 days later, I walked into the offices of Merritt Technologies. The receptionist froze when she saw me. Colonel Merritt. I thought. I'm here to see the interim board. The board had tried to block my entrance. Said I was no longer a beneficiary. Until I produced an official subpoena showing pending ownership review, backed by the state attorney's office. I walked into the boardroom where half the men in suits refused to meet my eyes. You let my brother embezzle $500,000. You ignored 5 reports of internal discrepancies. You allowed my mother to forge executive memos under my father's name. I tossed the documentation on the table. You now have 2 choices. Cooperate with the investigation, clean house, and reinstate the proper trust line. Or watch this company get torn down in civil court and dragged across every financial news outlet for the next 6 months. One of the board members, a young woman named Avery whom I remembered from the lower floors years ago, stood up. I move that we place Colonel Merritt on the interim oversight panel, she said. Effective immediately. No one argued. Back at the inn that night, I made myself tea and opened my laptop. I created a file called Legacy Shield. Inside, I wrote the names of every female veteran I knew who'd been cut out, shut out, or silenced by people who never served. Women like me. Women like Dad taught me to protect. The war my family started wasn't about property. It was about presence. About rewriting history to erase inconvenient truths. But they forgot one thing. I don't erase easily. I survive. I document. And when the truth comes knocking, I make sure it's in uniform. Depositions are a strange kind of warfare. No shouting. No bullets. Just facts, and the silence between them. The kind of silence that makes liars sweat. That's where the real damage happens. And I came prepared. The first to be questioned was Marla, my aunt. The one who begged the DA for immunity in exchange for testimony. She arrived early, lawyer at her side, looking like a wilted flower in designer silk. We sat across from each other in a small legal conference room with no windows. Just a court recorder, a few attorneys, and a stenographer tapping keys like a ticking bomb. Did you knowingly witness Evelyn Merritt forge her late husband's signature? Marla hesitated. Her lawyer whispered something. Yes, she said finally. I did. And did you participate in any aspect of the forgery? Her voice cracked. I passed along the forms. I didn't know the extent. Did you receive any money after the documents were signed? Marla went pale. Yes. How much? $75,000. Evelyn said it was a gift. I didn't blink. The audio was being recorded. The confession. Preserved. But it wasn't the money that twisted my stomach. It was that my mother had bought off her own sister to erase her daughter from a will. And Marla had let her. Next was Daniel. My brother swaggered in like he still thought this was some family squabble. His lawyer, slick, expensive, overconfident, kept tapping his pen like he was trying to intimidate someone. Didn't work. Mr. Merritt, the investigator began, we have bank statements tracing unauthorized withdrawals from your father's business account to a shell company you incorporated 3 months before his death. Can you explain that? Daniel leaned back. They were consulting fees. I helped him pivot the brand. He was old. Outdated. I could practically hear Dad's ghost laughing in disbelief. The investigator slid over a printed email. Is this your email requesting an expedited transfer of funds, dated 1 week after your father was hospitalized? Daniel stared at it. I was covering expenses. The room stiffened. I asked the investigator for a moment. He nodded. I leaned forward. Expenses like private club memberships, leased cars, and a trip to Dubai? Daniel's lawyer tried to object. The investigator cut him off. Colonel Merritt is speaking as both legal counterclaimant and trustee-elect. She may proceed. Daniel glared at me. You think you're better than me just because you wore a uniform? No, I said. I think I'm better than you because I didn't steal from the man who built our name. But the hardest deposition came last. Evelyn. My mother. She didn't flinch when she entered the room. She wore her pearls. Her tailored blazer. Not a speck of remorse on her face. She sat like a queen at war. Mrs. Merritt, the investigator began, you were recorded on video in the Home Office with your son, discussing altering your husband's estate documents. Do you dispute that? No. No hesitation. Do you admit the signature was forged? Forged? Perhaps. But not untrue. That man was losing his mind. I simply enacted what he would have wanted if he'd been in sound mind. My jaw locked. The investigator continued. So you admit bypassing legal procedure? I admit protecting my family from chaos. I finally spoke. No, you protected Daniel. From earning what he never deserved. Evelyn turned to me, calm as ever. You were always too rigid, Elara. Always bound by rules. Life doesn't reward honor. It rewards strategy. That's when I saw it. Not shame. Not regret. Just calculation. After she left, the room was quiet. The investigator looked at me. She's not going to plead out, he said. She's going to fight this in court. I know, I said. And you? I looked out the window. I'm ready for war. Later that night, I returned to Dad's old office. The one that had been sealed for weeks. Now, cleared by the court, it was mine to reopen. The air inside smelled like leather and dust. On the wall still hung our photo from my officer graduation. Him in dress blues, me in cadet gray. I opened his drawer, half expecting to find another surprise. But instead, I found something strangely new. A flash drive. No label. Just taped to the underside of the desk drawer. I plugged it into my laptop, half expecting old spreadsheets. Instead, I found audio files. Dozens. Time-stamped. Dated across 6 months before Dad's death. He'd been recording conversations. Secretly. I clicked the first one. Evelyn's pushing again. Wants to change the estate. Says Elara won't be around to manage things. I told her no. Again. Another. Daniel asked me to sign a power of delegation for the trust account. I refused. He got angry. Told me Elara was too far away to understand family needs. And then the last file. If anything happens to me before I finalize the trust, Elara needs to know. They're not doing this out of love. They're doing it out of greed. I've left what I can. She'll know where to look. I sat still for a long time. Dad hadn't just prepared for death. He'd documented the betrayal before it even happened. They hadn't just stolen my name from the will. They tried to rewrite the narrative. But now, I owned the original script. The next day, I filed for a full evidentiary review. The files, the audio, the forensics. The judge fast-tracked the case. Why? Because Evelyn and Daniel weren't just guilty of fraud. They were guilty of manipulating a dying man's medical records to justify their theft. That's medical fraud. Felony charges. I got a call from the DA's office that evening. We're proceeding with charges. I nodded. And what about the estate? Pending motion, it's being restored to its original heir, you. I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. But I did whisper something to myself as I hung up. It's not about the house. It's about the foundation. The courthouse smelled like old varnish and cold ambition. By the time the trial began, I'd already fought most of the battle outside the courtroom. But this, the public hearing, the testimony, the spectacle, this was where truth had to wear armor. The case was no longer just about estate fraud. It had widened into criminal conspiracy, with Daniel and Evelyn Merritt facing multiple counts of forgery, wire fraud, and obstruction of justice. I stood alone. As always. Except this time, I wasn't unarmed. I had facts. I had recordings. And I had legacy. Opening arguments were polite knives. Evelyn's attorney tried painting her as a grieving widow, cornered into managing a failing estate while her daughter was abroad, unreachable and emotionally distant. My attorney, Mr. Singh, countered with facts, dates, numbers, transfers, footage. No fluff. Just receipts. The jury nodded. Quietly. Constantly. And then came the witnesses. First up, Detective Monroe, the lead investigator. He walked the jury through timelines, document chains, and forensic signatures. Colonel Merritt's documents were consistent, notarized, and legally registered. The revised documents, those used by Evelyn Merritt, contained altered metadata, forged ink signatures, and digital inconsistencies matching fraudulent activity. Translation. They faked everything. Then came Aunt Marla. Immunity deal in place, she testified under oath. Evelyn said Alara would be too busy to fight. That no one would believe her. That family trusts are rarely investigated. She looked down when she said that last part. When cross-examined, she confirmed that Daniel had offered her compensation to keep quiet. How did you feel about that? The attorney asked. I felt sick, she whispered. But she took the money anyway. Finally. Daniel. He didn't take the stand voluntarily. But the prosecution subpoenaed him. His hands shook. He tried to act confident. I never intended to hurt anyone. I just thought I was protecting what Dad built. The courtroom tilted in silent disbelief. So they played the audio. Dad's voice, over the courtroom speakers. Daniel asked me to sign over control. He said Alara didn't deserve it. I told him she'd earned every piece of this family. He called me a fool. The room froze. One juror gasped. Another wiped her eyes. Daniel's attorney objected. The judge overruled. And then, it was Evelyn's turn. They didn't want her to testify. But she insisted. She walked to the stand like royalty, chin up, eyes cold. I did what I had to do to protect this family, she said, voice smooth as silk. But did you forge your husband's signature? The prosecutor asked. No, she lied. But you were recorded discussing the forgery, he reminded her. I was frustrated. Venting. It wasn't a confession. Mrs. Merritt, were you aware your husband had begun recording conversations 6 months prior to his passing? That's when her eyes faltered. I know. He turned to the screen. Audio played. Evelyn, if we wait too long, he'll get his senses back. We need to finalize the trust before Alara returns. Silence. The jury had heard enough. Verdict came fast. Guilty. On all counts. The courtroom didn't erupt. It collapsed in silence. Evelyn's face didn't change. Daniel cried. Marla bowed her head. But me? I didn't celebrate. I just closed my eyes. Not out of relief, but because I finally felt the war leave my shoulders. Later that week, I stood outside the courthouse. Reporters swarmed. Microphones were shoved toward my face. Colonel Merritt, do you have a statement for the public? I nodded. Just one. They leaned in. If you ever feel like your silence is the safest option, remember, cowards count on that. My family counted on my absence. My uniform. My deployments. My loyalty. But they forgot. I was trained to defend against ambush. Even when it comes from the people you once saluted at the dinner table. But even with the trial over, one piece was missing. A message had been left on my voicemail from a blocked number. Check the memorial lockbox. It was Dad's voice. Pre-recorded, probably part of the files I'd found earlier. I drove to the family plot that night. Behind his headstone was a small memorial bench with a storage compartment. Inside, a letter. Handwritten. Ink faded but fierce. Alara. If you're reading this, then they tried to strip you of everything I left behind. Don't let them steal your peace. Money and houses, they come and go. But honor. Honor is what stays behind when your name is all that's left. I trusted you because you never broke under pressure. You don't need a will to validate you. You are the legacy. I folded it. Pressed it to my heart. And for the first time in months, I cried. That night, I sat in the lake house. My house. Now legally mine again. The same place I used to clean rifles with Dad. Barefoot in the living room. Now quiet. But not empty. A knock came at the door. It was Avery, from the Merritt Tech Board. We voted, she said. You're officially CEO. Unanimous. I blinked. And if you want, we'd like to rename the Women in Leadership program after your father. I smiled. No, I said. Name it after my mother. Let her see what real legacy looks like. Peace is strange when you've been trained for war. 4 weeks after the verdict, I walked the halls of the lake house like a soldier still listening for gunfire. The quiet wasn't soothing. It was suspicious. Every creak of the floor, every rustle of wind outside made me brace. But nothing came. Because this time, the war was truly over. Legally. Publicly. Personally, I had won. So why didn't it feel like victory? The morning after I was named CEO of Merit Technologies, I sat at my father's old desk, now mine, looking out across the glassy surface of the lake. He used to say, "Still water runs deep, but it also hides sharp rocks." He wasn't wrong. My promotion had stirred whispers inside the company. Old board members who resented the outcome, investors who wanted a less controversial face, and employees caught between loyalty and survival. But I wasn't there to make friends. I was there to restore integrity. Day 1, I cancelled every shady contract Daniel had ever approved. Day 2, I fired 4 senior advisors who were named in the forensic report but escaped indictment. Day 3, I did something they never saw coming. I launched a veteran equity initiative. The program guaranteed pathways for women veterans, especially those recovering from PTSD or military sexual trauma, to get fast-tracked into cybersecurity, engineering, and R&D roles. It was bold, expensive, controversial, but it was right. I didn't want the company to survive. I wanted it to mean something. A month later, I received a letter from Redwood Correctional Facility. It was from Daniel. Handwritten. 3 pages. Blue ink. Clean handwriting like he was trying to convince me he'd changed. Ilara. I know you probably burned this before you even got past my name, but in case you didn't, thank you. For not pressing for maximum sentencing. For not ruining me completely. He claimed the prison chaplain had opened his eyes. He wrote about Dad. About how he resented the closeness we shared. How he always felt like the lesser son. How Mom fed that insecurity until he believed it was true. I hated that you were the hero. I hated that you never needed approval. But now I know you didn't have it easy. You just never made your pain the center of the room like I did. He ended with, "I'm not asking you to forgive me. Just, don't let me be the reason you stop trusting people who actually deserve it." I didn't respond. But I didn't tear the letter up, either. Mom, however, remained silent. She refused visitors. Denied every press interview. And despite what her lawyers wanted, she never filed for an appeal. Her sentence wasn't long. 5 years. But for a woman who lived on social currency, 5 years of obscurity might as well have been exile. I heard from the DA later that she refused even to say my name during sentencing. I'd become a ghost. One she couldn't haunt. On a cold Thursday morning, I visited my father's grave. The lake behind it shimmered. Leaves danced across the stone path. I brought no flowers. Just the new company brochure. The one with Merit Veteran Initiative on the cover and a row of smiling women on the back page. One in a wheelchair, one in hijab, one just 17 years old and fresh out of ROTC. I placed it at the base of the headstone. "Still making ripples, Dad." The wind whispered through the trees like a reply. 3 months later, I gave a keynote at the Veteran Women in Tech conference. I told the story. Not all of it. Just enough. I spoke about betrayal. About silence. About the way people assume that if you survive war, you must be fine. And then I said something I hadn't planned. People ask me how I stayed calm when my family turned against me. The truth is, I wasn't. I just knew how to hide it better. Because in combat, panic gets you killed. And in life, it just lets the enemy win faster. I didn't stay calm. I stayed clear. And clarity is the most powerful kind of revenge. The room erupted. Not in applause, but in quiet, standing stillness. The kind of stillness that said we get it. Afterward, a woman in her 60s approached me backstage. Her hands trembled. She had a lanyard labeled, "Press." "I covered your father's career back in the early 90s, she said. "And now, I've just watched his daughter rewrite everything they tried to erase." She paused. "You're not just a legacy. You're the correction." That one sentence felt heavier than any medal I'd ever worn. I returned home that night to an envelope on my porch. No name. Just a seal I recognized. Army JAG. Legal Division. Inside was a single letter. I expected paperwork. Maybe a notice. Instead, I found this. Asterisk, Colonel Merritt. You've been nominated for the Congressional Distinguished Public Service Medal. Not just for your military record, but for your unwavering commitment to justice, both on and off the battlefield. Asterisk. I sat on the porch for a long time, holding it, breathing in the quiet. Because for once, it didn't feel like waiting for an ambush. It felt like peace I'd earned. And yet, just when the dust seemed settled, a voicemail came in. Blocked number. Crackling audio. A voice I hadn't heard in 20 years. Ilara. It's Cole. Don't hang up. I saw the story. The trial. You think this ends with Evelyn and Daniel? You're wrong. Call me back. I found something in Dad's old deployment records. And it's not just about the company. It's about why he kept those safes. And who else was in on it? I stared at the phone. Cole. My half-brother. Dad's son from his classified years overseas. The one no one in our family ever talked about. The one Mom made sure I forgot. He wasn't just calling to catch up. He was warning me. The message replayed in my head for hours. You think this ends with Evelyn and Daniel? You're wrong. I found something in Dad's old deployment records. And it's not just about the company. I hadn't heard Cole's voice in over 20 years. Not since we were both 16. Me and JROTC. Him on the edge of disappearing into some foreign life. He was the forgotten son, the unofficial file my mother never acknowledged. He was the shadow of our family. And now he was calling from the past, dragging something with him. We met at a neutral location. A park in Charlotte. Cold air, empty benches, clean sightlines. He walked up in a worn denim jacket, sunglasses, and a military-issued rucksack slung over one shoulder. Still a ghost, I said, arms crossed. Still better than a target, he replied. He handed me a sealed envelope. Inside were two things. A photocopy of an unredacted deployment roster from Operation Falling Steel, one of Dad's classified overseas assignments. A black and white photo of a young Evelyn Merritt shaking hands with someone who should have never been near military intelligence. A businessman. Now a known arms broker. I blinked. What the hell is this? That, Cole said, is the man Mom worked for before she met Dad. Before she cleaned up her name and changed her history. He explained everything. Mom wasn't just a manipulative socialite. She was once an embedded civilian liaison with access to restricted tech intel during a critical op. She was recruited as a go-between for negotiations. But when Dad discovered her true ties, he buried it. Why? I asked. Because he loved her. And because if it ever came out, we'd all be targets. And that wasn't all. Cole handed me a thumb drive. It contained transcripts from encrypted briefings Dad had saved. He'd kept them hidden. Part of the contingency package he mentioned in his voice logs. One line stood out, typed in bold. If Evelyn reactivates contact with Vanguard, initiate emergency probate lockdown. Trust Ilara. No one else. I sat back, wind knocked from my lungs. The estate battle wasn't just greed. It was a smokescreen. To keep control of the company's intellectual property, and keep it from falling into the wrong hands. Daniel hadn't even known the depths of what he was caught up in. Mom had used him. She'd tried to reclaim access to something dangerous. And I'd walked straight into it without even realizing what I'd protected. The next morning, I filed a secure transfer with Military Legal Services. All tech patents, research, and access permissions at Merit Technologies were placed in a classified holding trust, protected under Veteran Secure protocols. Anything related to Dad's former ops? Sealed permanently under Homeland Security's oversight. It was the last lock on the vault. One I should have seen coming. I didn't contact Mom. What could I say? That I knew the truth now? That her betrayal wasn't just personal. It was national? She'd always lived in layers. I just never realized how deep they went. But I did leave a message with her attorney. Tell her I know everything. Tell her she failed not because I was her daughter, but because I was his. Cole disappeared again. No forwarding number. No trace. He left behind one thing. The photo of Dad and me at a training field, side by side in uniform. I never had that, he said before he left. But I'm glad one of us got to carry it forward. The weeks that followed felt different. Not peaceful. Not chaotic. Settled. Merit Technologies rebranded its research division as Project Sentinel. A secure pathway for veterans working in national defense innovation. The Merit Veteran Initiative reached over 10,000 applicants in its first quarter. Women with stories like mine. Stories that didn't start with victory, but with betrayal, survival, and reclamation. I walked through the lake house one evening and found myself in Dad's old war room. The map still hung on the wall. But now beside it, I framed something else. The letter from the Department of Defense, confirming the Congressional Medal for Distinguished Public Service. I didn't frame it because I needed recognition. I framed it because Dad never got to hang his. On a quiet Sunday, I stood at his grave again. This time, I brought nothing. Just a truth. I thought this was about the will. About the house. About Daniel. About her. But it was really about you, wasn't it? The wind rustled. You left me a war. And I ended it. I closed my eyes. Not with fire. With silence. With clarity. With everything you taught me. As I walked back to the house, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. No voicemail. No ID. I let it ring. Then I smiled. Not every call needs an answer. Some ghosts belong where they are. And some wars stay one.